It's good afternoon. My name is Albert Coulson Wiley Shovlin. I'm a British Korean War veteran. I'm a member of the Reading branch of the British Korean War Veterans Association, the only association for Korean veterans in the country. I served in the 3rd Regiment of the Royal Horse Artillery, and I volunteered for Korea. And I came to Korea, but I knew quite a bit about Korea to begin with, a bit of its history. And its history involved Russia, France, Britain, and America. And that's going back many years. In fact, there was nearly wars over Korea in those days. He landed in Busan, as we all normally did, and got off the ship, greeted by an American band with beautiful shiny helmets, and loaded onto a train. Oh dear. Oh dear. Anyway, it took a long time from Busan up to, well, the disbursing area where everybody was sorted out to where they would go or sent to. What on earth did you call that again? Oh, Tokchon Railhead. And I unloaded with all the rest, and I was a civilian mechanic to trade, so they sent me to a Pintail Bridge to jig troop of the independent mortar battery of the 61st Light Regiment Royal Artillery. The troop comprised of 4 anti-aircraft Bofors, and their detail was to guard, in the event of another invasion, Pintail Bridge. We controlled the road down to it. It was under our fire. And after they blew the bridge, we were supposed to escape with the cable across the river. I wouldn't like to try that. But the fighting was still pretty fierce, both at 355 and at the Hook. I was up, I drove a 3-ton lorry, and it was very often a ration truck for the forward areas, and I was up these places quite often. And I was involved in the last Battle of the Hook and 355, primarily because of the truck carrying ammunition. I carried ammunition up to both battles. And it was heavy. And I remember in the Hook one in particular, there was 2 of us from our unit there with the lorries, and we had came back after a couple of journeys and we were loaded up with the ammo again, and we thought, well, we'll go and have a cup of tea or coffee and a bun. And it started to get light. And we were having our tea when the WO came in and looking for volunteers to take ammo up to the front. Nobody said a word. And he went out, and he came back in with a broad smile on his face and said, drivers of the 2 lorries sitting out here loaded. I want them. So we had to step forward. He took us to his little buggy and he poured a lavish amount of rum into cups for us and bid us farewell. So we drove up, and when we approached the hook, the road rose slightly and then dipped down slightly. And when we got to the top and went down, I've never saw anything like it in my life. And I never want to see anything like it ever again. The convoys that were coming up, full of dead and wounded. No. One funny thing about it is one of our men from our little unit, he drove a quad. A quad was a vehicle which made of basically thin metal, and it towed a gun, and the crew sat inside this vehicle. And he had been given a trailer, and he had got it loaded with ammunition. And if I remember correctly, his name was Gunnarnion. He must have turned into the hook and carried straight on, and landed in no man's land, raging round about him. And he sat there all night, everything quieted down. And when everything was quiet and daylight and all that started up, back he came, got the turning, turned in to unload this ammunition, and wouldn't take it. Had full up, wouldn't take it. So he took it back to the ammunition point, and they wouldn't take it either because it had been issued. So I didn't know what to do with it, so eventually they dumped it into the river. Perhaps it's still lying there. Yeah, a load of 4-inch mortars ammunition. Yes, I have had little incidents like most of us have had. One of the funniest ones was we were not supplied with any materials for building anything. No metal, no wood, nothing. We had to scrounge for it. And I was sent out one day for a scrounging detail. And I went down, or went east, I should say. I didn't go north or east, or south. I went to the east. I'd never been that way before, and it was known as the White Front. And I carried on along that road, and on and on and on. And eventually we came to an iron bridge, and we cut over this iron bridge, and we were onto a dirt road which on a plain. So we were sailing forth along this road when there was a convoy approached. It was American trucks loaded with men. And there was a 1-star general was flying in the jeep in the front. Here's the Major now. And the dust from the road was absolutely horrible. And you couldn't see through it. So you're only fumbling along because there were about 6-foot ditches on both sides. Anyway, when we get through and the last truck had passed and I'm driving away, and a jeep came roaring up behind us with military policemen in it. And they stopped me. And the military policeman says, "Where did you come from?" I said, "Well, I came from Pintio." "You what?" "I came from Pintio." "Why?" He said, "Well, the general wants to know, and he also wants to know, have you seen anything untoward on your journey this way? I said, no, nothing at all actually. Why? He said, well, Baldy was captured last night again with the Chinese, and we're up to take it back. I said, well, I've never seen a thing. I often wondered if they watched me goodbye, thought, nah, it's not worth shooting at. But yeah, lots of funny things. But on the ceasefire, I was sent up to 355 with the truck, and I had no idea what was going on. We knew there was a time when there was a ceasefire, but I had no idea when. And I drove up to this particular murder bit when there was still incoming and so forth going on. Quite a bit of racket actually. And I drove in and I got stopped by this officer. And he said, just sit there, driver, and wait till I tell you, and you will switch on your lights. And I said, are you nuts? And he said, just do as you're told. So I sat there, sitting, and some of the banging and crashing and all that was going on. And then it ceased. And he said, switch on your lights. And I switched on my lights, and I was facing the flagpole. And they were lowering the flag. And that was, I think, 10 o'clock at night. It was 10 o'clock. But it's black. And from then on, we started withdrawing. We started withdrawing all men and material from the front. And I was up one day, and there was an American guard post, and I was speaking to a chap. And I said, well, you'll be quite happy all this is finished now, and that's it, by with. He says, it's not here. I said, what do you mean? He said, we lost the man last night. What do you mean you lost the man? Well, all we found was his rifle. We didn't find him. Oh. And he said, and by the way, he was a Red Indian. So they were losing men well after the ceasefire. And that was not a lone thing. Anyway, from then on it was spit and polish, I'm afraid, back to the old grind. And when I left, I was sent to Convoy on the back of an open truck in December. There was about 4 or 5 of us with our kit there, and one of them had a bottle of brandy. And we certainly enjoyed that bottle of brandy. I don't think it would stop us freezing, but we got there. Korea, I knew quite a bit about Korea. Actually, I knew about it when I was a boy. I was an avid reader, and I read quite a bit about it. And that's why I said to you about the almost wars between Russia, France, Britain, and America. At various times, each of these countries had their men in there in the leading jobs, like postmaster and things like that. There was always this fight to control the country. And I remember reading about one case where the American warship, it was a sailing ship, not steel vessels like now. It was the old sailing ships with cannons. They were cruising along and they needed water. So they sent a boat ashore with drums and barrels to get fresh water. And the natives slaughtered them. And the captain of the ship was rather annoyed about that. So he opened up in the village with his guns and slaughtered back. Not a nice story, is it? But there we are. But the train from Busan, yes, it stopped and started, it stopped and started. I was up in the luggage rack, sleeping. When I tried to sleep anyway, somebody lost their weapon, dropped their rifle over the side. I wonder if you ever paid for it. I've been out to Korea about 5 times. Yes, Edward Green and I were roommates twice. Yeah, and the change is remarkable, and the people who speak to you, and they're so grateful. It becomes an embarrassment. One gets embarrassed by it, really. But they're so grateful and they say it and show it. Yeah. And it came on in leaps and bounds. But as Adam has said to you, the population growth is unbelievable. I mean, when we were there, eventually there was 3, I think, bridges there. But now there's about 30 odd bridges. And yeah. Very industrious people. Some lovely places in Korea too. And if I could afford that, I think I would go and live there. Yes, I think I would go and live there in the summer. Not too keen in the winter. But as far as by the time I was there, we were fitted out with gear, clothing and all that. And yeah, you could live reasonably comfortable. Reasonably. Yes. Anyway, if you have any questions to ask, I'll try and answer them. In the Scottish unit, it's always been mostly English staffed units, very few Scottish people. I could tell you stories on the ship out where there were Scottish troops on it, but I'm not going to. No, sorry. No. He didn't put us in a very good light, actually. There were continual fighting between them and the English regiments. And when we got to Singapore, no, Hong Kong, we took a field regiment on, artillery field regiment on, and they informed the warring parties that if there was any war, they would have to swim to Korea. Oh yes, they meant it. So things were quite comfortable after that. Yeah. I didn't have much of a Scottish accent in those days. And when I came back from the army, I was decidedly more English spoken than Scottish. In fact, I was walking along the street in my hometown when a chap staggered out the public house, bumped into me, and he said to me, "What's the time?" And I said, "Oh, the time's such and such." And he called me an unpleasant English person. Suggested I return to whence I came and staggered off. And I stood in the pavement and I laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought it was funny, so funny. But my own life, when I was brought up on a farm, and my stepfather was a farmer. He'd been a seaman in his younger days, and all his sons had been seamen as well. And I went to sea, and I became an officer. And my wife didn't like it. Didn't like it, away from home too much. And my son's a lieutenant commander. And he operated out of Edinburgh. He was a welfare officer for the MOD at the time. But now he's with the international, what's his name? How do you know? I forget now. But it's sort of giving money here, there and everywhere for things to be done in different countries, different organisations. Millions are given away. He quite likes it. Adam doesn't know him though. Eric is dead now. He died a couple of years ago actually. We took 4 out, but they couldn't take the 5th one out. And he was a nice little man, Eric. He was a nice chap. He was a member of this branch. And by the way, there is no KVA. There is no KVA. There was at one time, and I was a member of it. But when the Colonel took it upon himself to shut it down, and did, even though 75% of the living membership voted against it, he still shut it down. And we knew what was coming, so we had already an organisation standing by to take over. And it became the British Korean War Veterans Association. And that is a legitimate, registered organisation. And we have continually pleaded with the Korean government to recognise us, but they tend to still recognise the BKVA, which doesn't exist. It only exists in the memory of the units who refused to join the BKWVA. It's tea and biscuits, social gatherings, in spite of what Adam says.